Welcome back to the channel. Shall we talk about the politicians that everyone is moaning about? Not just in the UK, but all over Europe. People are complaining that politicians are making our lives difficult and they're putting in these restrictions and the economy's suffering and blah, blah, blah. Let's quickly look at who the politicians are. When you have a child who's really smart and clever and is doing really well at school, parents usually say, oh, scientist, doctor, engineer, works in electronics, inventions, innovations. Have you ever heard anyone talking about their smart kid saying, oh, he's so smart and so clever, he is good at physics, maths, biology, all sciences, he's going to become an amazing politician? No. You have kids who have failed in every subject, who are really crap at their studies, and who end up doing a degree in history or a law degree perhaps, which they can't really hack it in the real world. A lot of them are lawyers by a degree, but they can never become a good lawyer. And many of them don't even have any decent qualification. But the bottom line is, politicians are the drudges of the society. In every society, all the smart people get well-paid jobs and they work in the private sector. No one wants to go do a job for 65,000 a year and get so much crap and grief from people. Everyone wants to have a nice life. If you believe that people go into politics out of the goodness of their heart and they're trying to do this because they want to change the world or their country for the better, I think there's probably 0.00001% people like that. And maybe initially some of them start off with a good intention to do the right thing. But it's impossible because you are chosen by the masses, by the population, who themselves are most of the times not smart enough to make the right decisions. They choose a person they like based on a few speeches and lines that they have given in their campaigns. In reality, they're not doing that job, so they don't know what the hurdles and issues are going to be. What I'm trying to explain here is that the politicians in reality are not really qualified to do the job that they're doing, but our system is flawed, and unfortunately we choose incompetent people without qualifications to run our countries, and we end up in this situation. When coronavirus started a few years ago, the UK government said, we are going to sit and watch and see what the situation is. Sweden said the same thing. We're not going to do any lockdowns. We're going to just look at how it goes and work on herd immunity. In the UK, because we are a very vocal population, people complained and moaned, and there was so much pressure from the press and the media and everyone saying the government's not doing anything, people are dying and the government's not taking it seriously. Obviously, the politicians have to protect their jobs and they have to make sure they keep getting voted in. So they said, let's do something. They ask consultants and different organizations and say, okay, the population wants us to do something. What should we do? And they will outline some steps and say, these are the things you can do. So they do a lockdown and all that. And then people say, oh no, now we're having psychological problems. We can't do this, we can't do that. So then there's a problem for the government. Then they go to these consultants and say, what should we do? And they say, well, you've done this, the next step would be this. Therefore, everything that the politicians are doing is based on what the people ask. It's not because that's what's good for everyone, whether it's going to help with coronaviruses. The only thing that they're doing that is the right thing to do is to protect and control the number of patients going into hospitals. Because if you have too many patients going into hospitals and they can't be dealt with, then there is an issue. So yes, I can understand that. But we created all these huge hospitals, the temporary hospitals like the one in Excel Centre in London, and there were a few others in other parts of the UK. They should have just carried on with those hospitals as the emergency care units for coronavirus victims or patients, and then they should have just restricted the movement of the vulnerable and the elderly people. That should have just allowed the rest of the population to work. Now, when you have a lockdown, people aren't able to work, businesses suffer, then people say, oh, the government should help us and support us. The money's not growing on trees. It's people like us who pay taxes that are then given back in the form of these support and furlough payments that everyone is enjoying and saying, yes, we need this free money. But that free money runs out because it's not growing on trees. If you're not putting any money into it, if businesses are not putting taxes, individuals are not putting taxes, then it starts to suffer and collapses. Therefore, they have to increase interest rates. They have to perhaps print money just to make it look like we have more money. The whole economy suffers. And then people say, oh, we're losing our jobs and all that. Well, you asked for the government to take an action. The government took an action. Now you're complaining that the action isn't good enough. It's a virus. There's nothing you can do to stop a virus. That's how it spreads. We've had the common cold, the flu, for the last 100-odd years. And it keeps changing every year. People still keep dying from it. There are vaccines for flu. They only work 50% of the time. So coronavirus will have several variations and mutations, and it will become just like another kind of flu. We just have to accept it, that there's some people who are going to die and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's very sad for those whose loved ones are lost, but it's the sad truth that it's the survival of the fittest. If your body is incapable of fighting a virus, well, it could be this or some other virus, and then that's going to have the same impact. So the bottom line is that the politicians are not clever people. They are just the puppets that ignorant people have chosen, and they are listening to the masses and doing these knee-jerk reactions. For example, in Belgium, France, Germany, Netherlands, even Switzerland, I was traveling around in October 2021, and it was like wearing masks, doing weird things when there was no sign of any virus at the time. There was no Omicron or anything. In Belgium, they were fining people for walking down the street on your own in a deserted area. If you're not wearing a mask, you were getting fined. In the UK, they fined 2 women who were in the forest with 2 coffee cups just walking. And they were like, no, you come from 2 different households. This is considered a meeting which you're not supposed to do. Therefore, they got fined. While our lovely politicians were sitting, having parties indoors, mixing all kinds of households and crowds. So I think, first of all, it's double standards. If you create a law, if you create a restriction, whether it's right or wrong, you should follow it yourself. Yes, you're listening to the masses because the masses elected you and you know what you're doing is wrong, but if you're making it for everyone, then you should do it yourself. However, all these restrictions are impeding on our lives and our freedom to move and do things. But unfortunately, the virus will still mutate. They will spread, whether you're wearing a mask or not. It's just simple laws of physics. Like I said in one of my other videos, unless you're wearing a hazmat sealed mask, it's no good. So I think blaming the politicians for these problems is completely a waste of time and very stupid, because we elected them, we tell them what to do, and when they do it, we say it's wrong. So they're just puppets. They're doing what we ask them to do. Otherwise, if they were capable of doing something good, they'd be working for some large private organization. Most politicians are the kind of people who cannot hack it in the real world. They want power and money, and because they're incapable of achieving it through the normal sectors and the normal businesses, they end up going into politics, building connections, and they just have to stay in that position for 5 to 10 years. And once they've done that, they build enough contacts that they can then get onto boards of different companies as advisors and all kinds of bullshit. Look at Tony Blair. He's done extremely well from being one of the worst prime ministers that this country's had, and he's still minting money. The regions that he bombed and destroyed, he's now the ambassador for those regions. And they are talking to him and taking advice from him. It's just an utter joke. The CEO of a bank makes 10 million or more pounds a year, whereas a politician, even the prime minister, probably makes 120, 150,000 pounds a year. So you can see the pay gap, the power versus the salary. I always say you should have 100 instead of 400 people in the parliament, but those 100 should be paid exceptionally well, and we should choose the right people because of their qualifications and skills, rather than the guy who stands with the megaphone and tells you that he's going to change your life, because if he could, he would have changed his own life to begin with. Thanks for watching. Until the next one.